Yeah. Hi, y'all. Welcome back. Replicon Radio. We are here. We're doing it. Right. And I have a very special guest on the line. You may know him as writer, director, several movies from Full Moon Studios and many more, including Killjoy, uh, and several others. We're going to get to know him right now. Mr. John Lechago. Hopefully I said that
Hello.
correctly.
You said great. Thank you, Paul. Hello.
How are you, man? We appreciate you hanging out and calling in and taking your time out of your surely busy schedule to hang out with us here at Replicon Radio just for a little while.
Excellent. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of our listeners and ourselves as well are big fans of the movies, and they've actually requested you and several members of some cast members of some of the movies you've done. So they're going to be super excited to hear this, and we're very grateful to have you a part of the show.
Wow, fantastic.
So essentially, man, we like to the first time we have a guest on, we don't obviously we want to talk about your movies and things that you're doing now, but we also like to get to know people and learn how it all got started and things like that. So we go back in time to the to America's Hat, if you will.
Yeah. Okay.
You were born and raised in Canada, and then I guess you ended up coming over to the States at a young age.
Not. Yeah. I came here when I was 4, so I consider myself basically USA raised.
Okay, yeah.
All my education has been here and everything. So, I think I'm Canadian in technically as a technicality only.
I gotcha. So I guess you were raised in L.A.
Yeah.
And then I guess everything. You kind of got started in the movie world or enjoying movies in a very strange way with one of the American heroes, Mr. Chuck Norris, I guess.
Yeah.
How did your story begin? Your journey into movies and cinema begin there?
Yeah. Well, I kind of, I was a strange kid that loved to draw, and I've always loved movies. And in fact, I remember watching movies in Canada on the television way back when it was black and white. And so I think that's probably pretty normal. But what also happened was when we moved here, my twin brother, and he's fraternal twin brother, so he doesn't look like me, but it was great to have, and play with, but we were kind of small, and my father knew that we were probably going to get beat up on the playground, which was absolutely true. You're a weird kid that's a little bit smaller, and the other kids want to pick on you. So he said, I got to get these guys in a karate class, and he went around Southern California trying to look for a really good martial arts school, karate class back then. And Chuck Norris had actual schools that were open to the public. And so he said, this looks pretty good, because that was before he was a movie star. And he was writing on the reputation that his martial arts students were just kicking ass in the point fighting circuit. I mean, really just, yeah, there was, including Chuck. Chuck was a legend and actually highly regarded, by his peers back then. It's not, and this is pre-beard. So he put us in the martial arts class, and I thought that was awesome because I used to love watching all those, kung fu theater television programs when I was a kid, and thought this was great. But on the third day, they came in with a 16 millimeter print of film. Some of you guys might remember and gals might remember what that is, and a projector. And showed a rough cut of his first film, which was Breaker. And I noticed that all the bad guys were, men in the class. Mm. And I thought, this is great. So, yeah, that was kind of what made me make the connection. Oh, this is people around me make these things.
Yeah, I guess it made it a little more real, more achievable type of a thing. Like, wow, this isn't... So it wasn't so Hollywood to you at such a young age. You're like, wow, these are people
Yeah,
around
yeah.
me.
Well, but, yeah. And then I kind of find out that we pretty much live a stone's throw from Hollywood,
Yeah.
which is cool. Well, and then, let's see, 3 years later, I'm 9.5 years old, and we get a call to, our school calls us up and says, Chuck Norris is doing a scene where he needs, kids, karate kids to class. And so we went to, that was for the movie Force of One. And I'm in there for like 1 second and stuff on the side. So when it first came out on video, you can see me because back then it was 3x4 video and they would crop the sides and I was gone. Only my brother was in there and stuff. But now I bet you maybe I could find a copy online that's full screen. You can actually see my little bowl cut head in there. But that was so exciting because I got to see, they had those big Panavision cameras and dollies and all these lights, so much light. I was just which we'll never do again. We won't need that much light anymore, but for film back then, they did so many takes. They had us do so much stuff. And then, of course, I'm only in there for a second. But it was really exciting. I got to actually understand, conceptualize how they made films. We had catering and food, and they gave us food, which was really exciting. We got to meet Chuck because, Chuck wasn't actually at his schools back then. He just, ran them and did his thing.
Yeah.
And then, and we made so much money. They paid me like $30.
Hey, you're 10 years old. That's
yeah, that was awesome. I was like,
Yeah.
Oh my god,
free food and $30. Yeah, you were rich.
and $30. Yeah, now I'm just going, uh oh. Anyway, but it was good.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's stories like that. Just
sorry, that was my notification. So I should probably try. Well, you'll just hear it once every so often. Anyway,
that's all right. But yeah, it blows my mind that like stories like that. I've heard similar, not obviously not that, but like it was bound to happen. Like your parents were just like, oh, we got to find a school. Oh, we just happened to find the one. Chuck Norris is about to, is going to eventually make a movie, and my child's just going to be part of a movie set at a young age, and now he's going to fall in love. It's just it's crazy to think about in hindsight that like those little moments is kind of what brought you to where you are in your life now. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I think life for the most part is just grabbing opportunities that they show up. They'll show up. It's like, okay, well, if this is your interest, grab it. Kind of use it and stuff. So immediately on set that day, I was like, okay, so this is how it happens. We do takes. We do this clapboard thing. There's we've got tons and tons of lights and cables, lights and cables and lights and cables. So I kind of was like, whoa, okay, this is cool.
Better start investing in lights and cables.
Yeah, basically, which you don't have to do anymore. Now it's like, okay, we got these cool LED lights and they can run on batteries and you're off to the races.
Yeah. So I guess, obviously you mentioned at that moment you kind of, even at a 10-year, you're 10, 9.5, 10 years old, you kind of knew like, hey, I want to do this. This is cool. And like that's something you are already aspiring at such a young age.
Well, kind of. The other thing that happened was, my friends in school were also, basically, I guess we didn't have the term back then, but we were geeks, and while other kids were playing sports, we like to come up with fight scenes, and then eventually we shot it in this weird little Super 8 movie called Return of the Ninja, and there was a friend of mine called Will Austin who, directed and starred in it and stuff. And I was one of the ninjas and everything. And that was also saying, hey, we made a movie. Unfortunately, that's lost in time now, but it was also a great experience. So kind of quickly went to, well, let's, after my experience on that set, retelling that story to my other creative friends, and we emulated it and did it and stuff. And then I pretty much the first thing I started to do was try and write. I tried to write more scenes when I was 11, 12 years old. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing, but it just caught me on that path. I thought I was actually just going to be a writer and write movies. During my driver's education, actually, I in school, I didn't do too well at first because the guy was a jerk, I'll just be honest. And so my father hired a private driving school guy, and the guy that was teaching for that private driving school was a screenwriter, and he just told the best stories. And I said, wow, I think that's what I want to do and stuff. What do I do? And he said, well, you need to learn how to write a screenplay. Get Sid Field's a screenwriting book. I forgot exactly what it's called, but that was like one of the old standby books that broke down what a screenplay is, how screen stories are organized, formatting, all that kind of stuff. And I bought it, absolutely absorbed it, and started to write screenplays.
Awesome.
So yeah, so far so good. Shall I continue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that path was interesting as well, because I quickly found out that anyone can write a screenplay, which is great and terrible all at the same time, because now you're up against thousands of other people, thousands of other screenplays, just incredible competition, and which is both good and bad. But how do you stand out? Most likely is you can. There's a very good possibility you might have a great screenplay, and it will never get read by someone who will make a movie. So I thought, well, maybe what if I make the movie myself? What if I shoot something? I shoot some scenes and try and show it to someone. So this is still back in the late 80s, early 90s, after I just graduated high school. I decided to invest in a camera, which back then was Super VHS.
Yeah.
And you have to say it like that. The other format was a thing called High 8.
Yeah. Oh, I had High 8 camera.
Yeah, you had to either one or the other, Super VHS or a High 8, and it's just, both of those formats are just pretty pathetic now, but, they were good video back then, and you could shoot stuff, and so I said, I'll just shoot some things, get some friends of mine together who are actors or who think they're actors. And this was up in Santa Cruz. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time. And I went out to try and shoot some cool-looking footage. And it was pretty much a horrible experience. We were cold. It was wet. We got lost in the forest out there and stuff. And by the time we finally landed and stuff, I was angry and pissed off and just kind of turned into a little bit of a tyrant and stuff, which apparently they loved. I was like, really? So not me being a tyrant, because you have to realize a tyrant for me is not abusing people. I'm actually a really nice guy, to a fault. And I found that out quickly. But when I took control, then everyone responded, and it's like, oh, cool, that was great that you took control. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I finally was able to put some footage together, and it wasn't too bad, And so I was like, oh, all right, maybe I could do this. So that kind of started me thinking about directing. The other thing that kind of helped is actually I have been trained in painting since I was very young. So I really do, and like oil painting, traditional oil painting, realist painting, and specializing in portraits, among other things. But it finally went to portraits.
Oh, wow.
So I really do know what I want visually. It's like, okay, I can draw a picture. I can paint you one too.
So you can kind of, so even with, thinking about directing, you're kind of already visualizing what you want the scenes to look like, what you want the overall, flow of the movie, and you picture the imagery in your head as you do like you would painting a picture.
Yeah, it's picturing the imagery in my head is pretty much standard, because I have had so much experience, doing art. Also, professionally, when I was in Santa Cruz, one of my jobs was airbrushing T-shirts for the tourists when I was basically a skinny, long-haired hippie kid at the Santa Cruz boardwalk. And that was a great experience, because, you only got $10 a shirt, and stuff. So you had to do a lot of painting real quick for people and understanding what their vision is and applying, your or copying what they bring you, stuff like that. So in addition to doing traditional oil paints, then going out there and actually trying to apply these skills, I learned how to airbrush T-shirts and learned a lot of pop imagery doing that. And so then I started to look at movies a little bit differently and break down visually what they look like. And of course, I've done a lot of terrible looking stuff too. And if you want to become a filmmaker, you got to do a lot of crap. You really do. Terrible stuff. Get it out of your system and stuff. But it pretty much, the experience accumulates. And so by the time I decided to go back to school, because actually I didn't go on to art school after high school. I spent 7 years. I followed a girl out to Santa Cruz. Yeah, that's true. Did my thing there. Tried to make movies there. Discovered that I was probably pretty much the most ambitious person in all of Santa Cruz at the time. And decided to. I'm sorry?
I said nothing wrong with that.
No, it wasn't. But Santa Cruz is like, it is such it lulls you to sleep. It is such a beautiful, lovely place to hang out and stay at the beach, and but I wanted more. So I actually found that I could get accepted to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a great art school. And guess what? They have a film program too. Kind of maybe a little bit too artsy. But I started off there and then transferred to Columbia College Chicago, which has a great industrial film program.
Awesome. So yeah, that's in Chicago. So you ended up going to film school in Chicago. I guess that's where you kind of learned, all the technical things behind the scenes stuff about movie making and things like that.
Yeah, which I really, really do like, and I some people will argue that you don't need film school, just go out and do it. But you know what, film school was a great experience for me. And, it's regimented and they teach you technically how to do stuff. The School of the Art Institute, because they teach filmmaking for, artists, lonely artists in the little rooms, the experimental art films. But what it's great for is that they teach you everything, like how to do it by hand. So that was really cool. It's like, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to develop it. I know how to do an optical printer. We actually worked with film. So that was really cool. And then transferring to Columbia College Chicago, they teach you how to look at traditional films. Like the best film class ever for me was film noir, where we would go and watch films for a class. I go, this is fun. And then just talk about it afterwards and break it down. But film noir was the B movies of the day. They aren't these amazing art films that we regarded them right now, or they weren't considered when they were being made at the time. They were the B movies that had to be very creative because their budgets were so small. And so that was a fantastic education, and then the film history courses that they had at Columbia, which were much more industry oriented, but they were really good. We broke down why Hitchcock is a genius, why these films in certain periods were important, what we think of, what happens psychologically when we watch films. These are things you learn in film school. You learn a lot of theory, you learn history, and that really, really does help. It really does help your repertoire. You can do this on your own. You can go out there and buy books on your own. You can, get the magazines. You can consult with people. But having teachers in the program kind of gets you on the fast track. So I really do think I got a lot out of it, even though I will never ever show my degree to anyone because they don't care. They don't want to see your degree.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, and that's that. I feel like that goes for a lot of things. Now, I mean, you may not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, there's ways to succeed differently than education, but at the same time, a good place to start is the history of whatever you're doing. So learning all the things that have people done, good and bad, in that, I mean, that's definitely a huge learning experience. Plus learning the different styles. And I feel like you were in a really good time because you were still in film, like actual film and editing and learning all of those things right at the beginning of the digital age, which I'm sure you're part of that now is the digital.
Yeah.
But knowing all the knowledge that probably a lot of the younger people and the people coming up now may not know, which could definitely help you in a lot of aspects of the new world.
Yeah, I think that having an understanding film helps me conceptually with a lot of things. But I cannot poo-poo on modern filmmaking in the digital age either, because that's what the kids have and that's what they learn, and there are going to be new people coming up that have only experienced digital filmmaking, and they're going to be great filmmakers. I'm not going to say film is dead and everything, because we don't actually have film anymore. It's now just zeros and ones. It just evolves like anything else. And the thing is that digital mediums right now are so good that I think they surpass film. I think they give you a better image now.
Oh.
So,
yeah, quality-wise and everything. Yeah, that's the truth. For sure.
At the beginning, it was like, you had limitations. It was a little bit of a crapshoot when you shot stuff, and you saw some of the cracks in the armor. But now it's like, we're shooting 8K now. You have a huge. Yeah, it's just 8K. Your eye cannot distinguish anything more than 2K. And for people who don't understand, you can say that's roughly an image 2,000 pixels wide. Beyond that, it can't tell between 2,000 pixels and 4,000. You certainly can't tell between 4,000 and 8,000. Yeah. What that is good for is actually post-production, fixing stuff, doing visual effects, instances where you need to punch in a little bit. But even then, those resolutions, so I guess this is my technical spiel, those resolutions only mean something if you also have a lens package that can actually resolve an image of that resolution on your wonderful sensor chip.
It's absurd. Yeah, we have to wait for science to advance our eyes before we can catch up to technology at this point.
Yeah. Well, and our eyes are not nearly that good either. We think they are because our brain does an amazing job at interpreting images, interpreting data, which is actually, if you could see it objectively, which is a really funny concept, seeing your own vision objectively. No, you can't do that. You can't look at it objectively. Our vision is actually more horrible than we think it is. Our brains do an amazing job of making sense. You only have like 1 or 2 degrees, I believe, this off the top of my head, but from what I've studied, 1 or 2 degrees of vision in front of you where the sweet spot that you can actually see in detail and focus. Then as you go away from that, it just turns to mush. But we don't that's called our peripheral vision, just goes to hell. Yeah. But we don't experience it that way because our brain's like, yeah, we'll make sense of it. You don't worry about it, so.
We got you covered, man. We got you covered up here.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, right? Yeah. So, and we have more than one system of vision in our brain and in our eyes as well. We just don't know it because it's integrated in everything. But we have a reptilian part that is, kind of taps into our black and white sensors, our night vision. The rods as opposed to the cones, and then the color vision, which is the cones, and that's the more modern system is the cones, and it's a lot slower, but it gives us all that rich detail and color, So, and these are things that I think are important for a filmmaker, because when you're trying to make an image, on the screen, it's like, so when you have shallow depth of field and you have your stuff in the background go out of focus and everything, why does that look cool? Because our brain only needs to focus on a certain part of the element. So you have a nice juicy portrait shot of your actress and stuff, and you focus in on her eyes and a little bit of her cheeks and stuff and her lips, and it looks really beautiful. Everything else is just is whacked out of focus and everything, and that looks great. So there's even focus is really an illusion.
That's all. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome that that you think about it that much. I've never thought about it like that, but that's cool. But yeah, because you you're gonna make the image obviously you want people to focus on is gonna pop a little more if your brain isn't busy trying to figure out what's going on behind it.
Right, and so, well, what I just described is also like the difference between a professional image and an amateur one. A lot of amateur filmmakers, and God bless their souls, I love them all, really, because making a film is hard, and if you make a film on your consumer-grade camera that has a permanently attached zoom lens that gets everything in focus, because that's how they're designed, great, that's really cool. But then when you get a bigger budget and you can afford lenses and this and that, what differentiates more of a professional shot is that you will have a shallow depth of field. Your subject that you want to focus on, literally, will be like the person's face and their eyes, and everything in front of that and behind that will be out of focus. And it gives us this really interesting, otherworldly feel. It's really a very pleasant kind of sensation, I think, when you look at it. And maybe it's because your brain says, okay, I'm going to only focus on this and kind of use my brain power just to look at this. Everything else I don't really need to think about. I don't need to comprehend what these edges here and here and here mean, because I know that that's information that's not really useful to me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah.
And it looks great.
Anyway, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks great. Yeah, it totally does. It totally does. But, that's where the difference begins then. It's like, okay, I really got to invest in, $10,000 for either invest in buying a awesome set of lenses, or you can go rent some and stuff. But when you start making better movies, when you start making better images, you understand why why the professionals use these certain sets of things. There's definitely a reason for that.
That's awesome. So obviously, yeah, there's a lot of things that the amateur doesn't, you may not know about. So film school is great. So you're in Chicago. You finish your film school. You head back to LA. So where is your mind? Are you like, yay, I know how to do it. I'm going to go back to Hollywood. I'm going to make big budget movies. I'm going to be a director.
Yeah.
Where is that kind of where your head was, or where?
Exactly. I'll go back there. They'll welcome me with open arms. They'll come running and stuff. They'll roll out the red carpet, and none of that stuff happened. So,
yay, we have a new director in town. No.
Right. It's like, maybe I can start getting to work on some film sets, and that just as I land, basically, big writer's strike, which puts, everything on hold, and like, oh shoot, I can't even get a job now. So I actually started to raise money. A friend of mine came in some money and stuff, and we started to make a film ourselves, and that was this film called Vermis, which will never see the light of day. Actually, that's not true. It might, but so far it's never seen the light of day. We shot it on film. It's got, it's got martial arts, it's got monsters, it's got all sorts of good stuff. It was super micro budget and everything, but it was a failure. But what happened was that I went to show someone just for some help, some post-production help, and it was called Turning Point Productions, and it was how should I call it? Corporate video. It was a corporate video place, and actually they ended up hiring me because they needed an editor. They said, oh, you edited this yourself and you shot most of it and stuff? Well, we need someone, so I got a job.
That's perfect.
and that was great. And what ended up happening was we did a couple really big jobs for some big corporate clients, and the owner of the company had $5,000 and he left over that he could spend, and he said, you know what, you want to make the movie, go ahead, you've got $5,000. And I said, okay, I'll make a movie for $5,000, and that happened to be Blood Gnome. And we did finish Blood Gnome. We shot it on video. It was standard definition, and it also has everything, but with a little bit of a smaller price tag. But it had Julie Strain in it. It had lots of boobies. It had lots of blood. It had the monsters. It had everything. And we sold it to a company that made a deal with Blockbuster, and we got about $120,000 out of it.
That's awesome. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, not too bad, because I think overall, everything ended up being about $15,000 after the initial shooting, and we kind of went through the $5,000, and I put in $1,000 more of my own money, which was a lot for a young man back then.
Absolutely.
The boss looked at footage and said, "Actually, this is not bad." So we did a lot more post production and a better soundtrack and better sound and stuff, and it's kind of like a little cult movie now. Might get new legs because I'm thinking of putting it out on Amazon. We'll see. Amazon Prime.
There you go.
You know, but after we finished that, we showed it at in a small movie theater on the Sony lot, and Stuart Gordon, the director of Reanimator and From Beyond, ended up at the showing. I still don't really know how he did and stuff, but we became friends, and he said, "This is really good." Of course he'd like it. It's full of boobs and blood and mayhem and monsters.
Everybody's favorite stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a totally Reanimator, which was actually, before I met him, that was the first DVD I ever bought, was Reanimator. You know, it's like one of my all-time favorite movies and stuff. And he just happened to show up and said, "Hey, I'm Stuart Gordon. I really enjoyed your film. Let's have lunch." I go, "Really? What?
Wow.
What the hell is going on?" That's awesome. So it was Stuart Gordon that then would eventually introduce me to Charles Band of Full Moon.
Woo, yeah. So you did the Blood Gnome, and then I guess you guys made another movie with Turning Point. And then I guess
Yes.
your plan was kind of to start your own production company or do your own thing?
Well, not really. And I think that's what probably everyone's intention is, at least as far as people doing B movies like I am. You know, say, "Oh, let's do our own thing," and it's extremely hard. So that hasn't really happened. Although I have done a handful, not a handful. I think maybe ultimately 3 movies on my own. But it kind of, I think Full Moon probably helped me get the reputation I have with fans now, and this is why we're talking. It's basically the Killjoy movies.
Absolutely.
You know. And you know, even we shot the first one in China, and that's where I met my wife. You know, who was the head of the art department.
Awesome.
There, you know, and then, yeah, that was a funny story too and stuff, because, "Oh yeah, you just want a Chinese wife." And like, no, I live in Southern California. I can, you know, if I find a Chinese wife. No, she's a colleague and I really love her. You know, it's like, and she's also the strangest girl, one of the strangest girls I've ever met, which was awesome. But you know, as a fellow art school graduate, you know, from the big art school in southern China and stuff. And then we did 2 more, you know, Killjoy films in the United States. So I think that really helped me get a reputation with B movies, because, yes, it was good to have Full Moon, basically the Full Moon promotion promoting me. Oh, that sounded awkward. Full Moon promotion promoting me. And basically that kind of distribution. But what I was able to do was, you know, I was thankfully able to do a little bit more with the movies than Charles Band originally thought that I would. So he gave me that leeway and let me experiment and go a little bit crazy and do something that people didn't expect, which was, I think, probably the most significant thing in Killjoy Goes to Hell. You know, I said, well, people like Killjoy. The fans like Killjoy a lot more than they like the victims.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're only asking one of the victims back as a witness, but it's going to be all about Killjoy. He's going to be our protagonist this time, as well as his posse. You know, the fans loved Batty Boop. You know, they loved Punchy and Freak Show. You know. And so it's like, well, yes, they died at the end of but the demons, we're going to bring them back.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're demons. They're dead. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's just to get a little bit more human blood, and ta-da, there you go. So I think, I really do have to thank Full Moon for that. And just because I called Charles Band up just a little bit and said, "Hey, anything that I can talk about? Anything that's coming up?" He says, "Yes, you can watch these movies on. We have a Full Moon Features app, so you can go to the Apple Store or Android and type in Full Moon Features, and there's an app that get you access to all Full Moon's movies. There's literally Full Moon Features."
Awesome. It's just an app. Is it a free app, or you pay for it, or?
I think the app is free, but then the service, because I have not. I'm terrible. I guess I don't have the app.
That's all right. Go
I
check
just
it
make
out.
the freaking movies.
That's
I
right.
just make the movies. But you can go to fullmoonfeatures.com and get information there. Actually, I think there might be some streaming there. And then there's going to be Full Moon Features, the app through Android or Apple, also iTunes. You can get it through iTunes, and it'll give you access to all these, including the Killjoy movies.
There you go. Yeah, there's a lot of places to stream the movies. I've seen like Full Moon channels and stuff on a few other programs.
Right, Amazon. Yeah, that's the main one as well and stuff. But now it's pretty much he's consolidating everything in one app, which is great because he also has his whole previous library. He also has a few other libraries as well. So it's Charles Band has incredible ability of putting these libraries together. Also another thing to check out is, got to do my plugs, is deadly10.com. That's his slate of movies that he's producing now. And about a couple months ago, I shot Blade, the Iron Cross, which is a Puppet Master spin-off on just like probably the most popular Puppet Master puppet is Blade. And I'm literally in the middle of post-production right now. It's like before you called, I was syncing sound. It looks great. Syncing sound to picture, and then after we finish talking, I had to go back to syncing sound to picture. But it's going to be great once we finish it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely huge. He's definitely the most recognizable character in a huge franchise. Which, I mean, besides Killjoy, I would probably say Puppet Master is, one of the biggest things Full Moon did. Probably got them most of their recognition, especially early on.
It is his biggest franchise, which is why when the Deadly 10 came out, and he said, "Oh yeah, so maybe I can direct one or two of these." I said, "I'm doing Blade." I was like, okay. I was not shy about it. Sorry, Charlie, if you're listening to this, but I was like, I'm gonna do Blade. I kicked ass with Killjoy. I'm doing motherfucking Blade. Sorry.
No, you can cuss. You're more than welcome to cuss, man.
Oh, okay, great. Anyway,
I was going to say that earlier when you said poo poo, but I just let
yeah. Well, I have young kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. So,
you're used to it. I hear you.
Trying to be a responsible parent.
Absolutely. So yeah, I definitely want Blade. That's huge. Look, taking us one step back real quick. You were mentioning you were making these movies. Obviously, you weren't. You were unknown, and as a director, luckily you had Turning Point help you out there. You guys pretty successful independent. I know you went on to make Contagion or Bio Slime.
Yeah. It's gone back to Bio Slime. Yeah.
How did you end up meeting? Like, how did the Full Moon connection and you end up meeting Charles Band? Like, how did you go from, where you were to the Full Moon? How did that connection come across? How did you guys end up meeting each other? And how in the world did you get to, a franchise that was already created and I guess at that point was kind of dead? You were the guy to rekindle it as essentially a newcomer. Like, how did that all come about?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, so that goes back to meeting Stuart Gordon, director of Reanimator and From Beyond, amongst others great movies. Castle Freak, of course, can't forget Castle Freak. And he introduced me to Charles, and I started with Full Moon, not directing, but doing their visual effects. Now, I'm not a visual effects artist, but because I've been artistically trained and had the software and had to do visual effects for my own movies because I can't afford anyone else, it's like I fit the bill for Charles Band. I did visual effects for, I think, 3 of his films already, and they turned out great. And he did basically I had Stuart Gordon say he already did a couple films. They looked great, so I already had that experience. By then I already did Blood Gnome and Magus, and so Charles Band then decided to take a chance on me. He at the time was shooting Puppet Master 9, I believe, with David Dakota in China, and they thought, well, why don't we then have one more production on those same sets, just redress the sets, and that one was going to be Killjoy 3. So at first I was like, I don't know, the Killjoy movie did not do that well and stuff, and no disrespect to those original filmmakers, those were extremely low budget, and they made the films, they completed it, great job, awesome, and everything, but it was kind of tough. It was kind of a tough task to turn around and see where else I could go with it, But the same thing was true with the second one, and the second one was produced by the awesome, magnificent Trent Haga, but still, they were so, they had very, very limited means and stuff, and it's like, how do I break this out of the cycle? Well, fortunately, since it's being shot in China, I could kind of raise the production value a little bit, because we were kind of writing off of someone else's sets. And I think that had a lot to do with it. And then I also, since I wrote and directed it, will be doing the visual effects, and kind of, I think my main mission was like, let's just keep this all a little bit more consistent, and I think that really helps with what I needed to do. So it did great. It did great. Once I finished it and went out there for reviews and went, actually, I think it was the first movie that went out to Redbox for Charles Band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was actually the first one in Redbox for Charles Band, and people ate it up. So I was like, oh, awesome, it did well. So then, yeah, definitely, the Killjoy Goes to Hell 2 years later, we shot in Los Angeles. And that one also did great, mostly because I thought, well, we have to give them something totally different. And I was even more of a control freak. So,
but you learned it. Apparently, I was gonna say, but you learned at a young age. That's when you're the best, right? And that's when people like you the most.
Yeah, I think so. Now, which doesn't mean I don't like to collaborate, but I absolutely have to be the last word in what goes on. And I think if you direct a film, that's what you need to do. That's the only way your films are going to have any personality. It's like, don't say no. If you like someone's suggestion, go ahead, use it. But if you're kind of on the fence about something, it's like, go with your gut, because if you fail, then you blame yourself. If you fail on someone else's suggestion on your film, guess what? You're still going to get blamed. So at least have it be always your final decision, what you felt is right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was pretty much the journey to Full Moon was through Stuart Gordon and him, basically give me a good word. And then I did a lot of work for them over the years, not just directing films, but just visual effects for pretty much almost every film that they've done for the past 10 years.
That's awesome. So yeah, you definitely became an asset over at Full Moon, so I'm sure you're going to be there for a long time.
Yes, or maybe not. I don't know. There are other things afoot too, because I'm like going, well, I've got to try to do other things. Another thing I'm working on these days is I'm also working for a company called Platinum Studios, and those that operate. That's the company that brought you Cowboys and Aliens.
Oh wow, that's awesome! And you're doing like graphic novel work, you're like big books and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and our first graphic novel that I had a hand in putting together, and actually it was a little bit strange how I came into it. So we came up with a new position or a new title, which when the boss is Scott Mitchell Rosenberg, who is the guy that created Malibu Comics, says, we'll just call it this. It's like, okay, then it's okay. It's official. So what happened was, they did Platinum Studios, they did Cowboys and Aliens.
That's the first half. John Lechago interview. There's a whole nother 42 minutes to go, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the second half of this super dope interview, and we learn a lot of stuff and what the future holds. More about Blade. Is there going to be another Killjoy movie? Is Batty Boop coming back? You never know. So stay tuned. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. Look on your screen right now. Sign up for our Patreon. Patreon.com/Replicon Radio. We're going to be doing a live interview. I've never done one of those. I mean, on Patreon. I've never done one just for Patreon. So as this interview was recorded, it will be actually recorded live for the Patreon. So that's going to be going down this Saturday. So sign up now as low as $2 a month. Subscribe to YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Replicon_radio. And yeah, stay tuned for part 2. Sorry I had to do that to y'all. Love ya.